check in with Amber? I see that there were a number of questions that came in while I was talking.
Thanks, Erin. All right. So I did kind of try to group some of these together. So I had told some folks, like for example, if you're asking about occupational therapists, nurses, I'm going to kind of group all of those together. But I do want to start with James Keeley's question. So if the BOE is under the city umbrella, for example, payroll, invoices, et cetera, and it's paid by the same finance department as the city, are non-certified staff considered city employees and therefore not subject to PA 25-174?
Great question. We do know that there are certain towns where there is um, a blending between the Board of Education and the city itself. I'm going to turn it back to you and say, who is paying? What is the name on the paycheck? If they are considered to be school employees, but the town payroll is simply processing the school employees um, pursuant to an MOU or something, then they're school employees. But if they are, nope, they're a city employee, they are in the city union, they are reporting up to the city financial director, then they're city employees. And they would be excluded because they fall under the municipality definition instead of the Board of Education definition. So it's really a conversation for you to have with your counterparts in the city.
Thank you. All right, so now I'm going to circle to the school workers that require licenses. So this is going to be our school nurse eligibility, the occupational therapists. The real question here is, are they excluded because of their state license? And I know we touched base on this briefly earlier.
Yeah, so I mean, the primary answer is if you have questions, the State Department of Education is the authoritative source. But I will also say certification is different than permit, which is different than license, right? So you really want to be focusing on that certification pursuant to Chapter 166, which is different than a license or a permit.
Excellent. Okay. If an employee works for two employers, how would their benefit look? Does it include benefits from both employers, and how would they properly supplement?
Great question. So because we are outside of individual employers, we look at the covered employee's entire work history. We get access through an MOU to data that is provided to the State Department of Labor. We ask the applicants, who are your employers? And so we'll say, all right, we're going to look at your total wages from all of the employers during the base period, which is the first 4 quarters of the 5 most recently completed quarters. So it might be former employers too. We look at all of those wages and use that to determine both your eligibility and your benefit calculation. If you are, we also use it to determine your schedule. If you're taking leave from everybody, then you're drawing down. But if you're taking leave from one employer but not another, we say, okay, well, what is your total work hours? You work 50 hours when you add everybody together, but you're really only taking leave 30 hours a week, and we treat it as a reduced schedule. So it affects your benefit proportion.
And while we're kind of on the topic of calculating the benefit, can you talk just for a moment on how reduced schedule or intermittent leave would be calculated for 12 weeks?
Right, great question. So as I mentioned, the 12 weeks is your 12 work weeks. So we first say, how many hours do you work in a work week? Oh, and you work 30 hours a week. Okay. Now you tell us you need reduced schedule and you need to be out of work for 10 hours a week. So you are taking 1/3 of your week. So your benefit will be reduced, but you are drawing only 1/3 or 33% of a week. And so your 12 work weeks of benefits is actually going to be extended. So it's more calendar weeks than work weeks. Um, so I don't know why I did a third, because that makes the math a little tricky. But instead of getting 12 weeks, you would get whatever that is. I think it's 20, if the math works right in my head. Intermittent is similar. It's just we ask for intermittent folks, they have to tell us exactly when they're out and how much time they're out. And we do the proportion sort of on the fly.
And I think this is a kind of a good way to roll into the next one, which is, if an employer has an employee that's on a reduced schedule, so they're getting a partial payment, how can the employer help make them whole by allowing them to compensate for the difference? And how do they
Great question.
monitor it?
Yeah, so that's really a coordination of benefits question, and it applies across the board. Our statute says that an employee can receive benefits from the Connecticut Paid Leave Program at the same time as they receive income replacement benefits from their employer, provided that the total amount does not exceed 100% of their regular wages. Okay, so on the employment verification form, we say, are you giving your employee any money while they're out on leave? If you say nope, then we say, great, we'll just do our thing. If you say, yeah, I'm giving them 100%, then we say, okay, well, they're at 100%. We can't give them any money right now, so they're not going to draw against their entitlement. You say, yeah, they're going to use their sick leave for 2 weeks. We're like, okay, we'll start on week 3. Or you say, yeah, we know that you are capped in your benefit because our benefit amount is a sliding scale based on their um, highest 2 quarters, and it's capped at 60 times Connecticut minimum wage, which right now is about $942 a week. So we are going to top them off, and we say, great, we'll pay what we would pay. We'll tell you what that is, and you can pay them more as long as you don't pay over 100%. Like that's going to be your responsibility. If you have some sort of agreement where you are required that, no, we pay what we pay, and you guys have to adjust. You tell us that, and we say, okay, well, if you're paying 50% of their salary, we will pay 50% of our benefit. We can't guarantee that your 50 plus our 50 equals 100% of their wages, because again, our calculation is more complicated than that, but we will adjust proportionally. All of this sounds more complicated than it is in practice. Really, you just have to look at the form and check the box, and we'll work with you on the rest.
Thanks, Erin. And kind of on this double dipping 100% piece, we have a question that says if they're being paid sick leave from the employer, then they would not be eligible for CT paid leave. So I believe that is what we're saying if they're getting paid 100%.
That's correct. So, say you have a rule that says, look, you need to use your sick leave when you're sick. You can have that rule. There is a provision under Connecticut FMLA that says employers can permit or require their employees to use their accruals while they're out on Connecticut FMLA. However, it's important to know, you can't force them to exhaust all their time. They have to be allowed to hold on to at least 2 weeks composite. Um, you know, so you've got an employee who has 8 weeks of sick time available to them. You can't force them to use 2 weeks. So now it's like, hey, we want you to use those 6 weeks. Sure, you can do that. Just tell us, and we'll start paying on week 7.
Thank you. All right, so I want to pivot the topic of discussion now over to our substitute teachers. We have quite a few questions regarding substitute teachers. So the first one is, our subs do not have a set schedule, but are they part of the new law?
Yeah, they will be. They are covered. And so we ask for folks who do not have a regular schedule, we ask how many hours did they work each week of the previous 12 weeks? We deal with that with a lot of different professions where they might have a sporadic schedule or frankly, overtime, things like that, we need to know so we can adjust. So we just ask for that information.
Thank you. And what if a substitute makes over 23, 25 in one of their quarters, but not, say, the second, third, fourth, or even fifth?
Great question.
And then I have a follow-up question to that.
Okay. So the 2325 goes to our eligibility standard. In order to be eligible to receive benefits from us, you have to work for a covered employer or have worked for a covered employer at some point in the 12 weeks before you need benefits, which helps with seasonal workers, temporary workers, recently unemployed workers. And You have to have earned at least $2,325 in the highest earning quarter in the base period. You only need one. So if you have a substitute worker who hit 2325 in one of those quarters, and they are either working for you or just recently worked for you, they're eligible. Their benefit is based on their highest two quarters. So, um, you know, they earned 2325 in the first quarter and they earned 2000 in the second quarter and less than the other two quarters. Well, we would do 2325 plus 2000 divided by 26, and that becomes their average weekly wage.
Thank you. So this one is on the FMLA side, and we do like to ask folks to reach out to DOL for guidance on FMLA, but this one here is CTFMLA is concurrent with federal FMLA, if it is. Can you clarify that we cannot now require the employee to exhaust their accruals?
Okay. If it's running concurrently so that they're drawing from their federal FMLA entitlement at the same time that they're drawing from their Connecticut FMLA entitlement, which they would do if they're eligible under both laws and the reason for leave is covered under both laws. Connecticut FMLA says you cannot require exhaustion, and they're on Connecticut FMLA. So there's sort of no way to require exhaustion under federal and not required under Connecticut if it's all happening at the same time. So you kind of just have to accept that reality. If they were out only on federal FMLA, then you could require exhaustion.
You, Erin. Would the tax apply to all substitutes regardless if they are working a regular schedule or as needed?
Yeah, so again, this is a payroll tax that applies to anyone who is working in a position for a school that is not required to have professional certification. And when we talk to the STE, they're like, yep, subs are not required to have professional certification. But if you have questions, they're the authority. But yeah, you would take that 0.5% payroll deduction out of their paychecks, whatever, when you issue their paychecks.
And this is, we have temporary custodians who don't work every day. Are they eligible to make contributions and receive benefits?
They are required under the new law starting October 1st. So yeah, so you would have, if they are your employees, you are responsible for them. If you hired them from, some firm and they're just coming to you pursuant to a contract, then that firm is required to be doing all of this and probably already has because they've never been excluded. But you would, again, they're your employee, you would take the deduction from their paycheck. If they file a claim, you would be completing that employment verification form saying they're not required to have certification, whether they do or do not get a choice of how they get paid, and what their schedule has been. And if it's sporadic, you would give us, this is how much they worked in the last 12 weeks.
Excellent. And right now we have one question left, and this one is regarding the software. It says ERP. I'm wondering if that's employer portal, but somebody had told this individual that the software wouldn't be completely developed to handle this until December. Are we aware? Can you speak to that at all?
So I can tell you that we had conversations with Tyler Tech, which is responsible for Munis, as well as School ERP Pro. And they were like, yep, we're good. Like our system will account for this. It's just a matter of using the existing capacity in this way. If there are other softwares out there that are bespoke to schools, please feel free to let us know. We're happy to reach out to them. But if they're just general payroll softwares, again, our program has been in existence with contributions being starting in 2021. There are 13 other paid leave programs across the country. So most payroll softwares are kind of up and ready for this. I also just want to let you know in our last few minutes, we have a very close relationship with third-party payroll providers. And so if you use any of the big third-party payroll providers, the ADPs, the Paychecks, you know all the names as well as I do. Again, we've been talking with them since 2020, and they've been doing this for thousands of employers. So, you know, it should be okay. It may just be that you have to do some work on your end to make sure that you're designating people properly so that the deductions come from the right people.
Thank you, Erin. And this one is we have a BOE minute taker that gets paid per meeting 10 to 12 months a year and not on an hourly basis. Are they included?
So, I mean, they work for a board of education. They sound like they're not required to be certified. So as long as they are an employee and not an independent contractor. So our program allows independent contractors, so folks you give a 1099 to, they are not employees. So they are not covered by our laws, but they have the ability to opt in on their own. If this is a 1099 person, then that's their own personal choice, and they would handle all of it themselves. You wouldn't get involved. If they're an employee, then they're in.
Excellent, thank you. All right, everyone, so we are at 12 o'clock. So we're going to conclude our questions for now, but if you do have any further questions, please do reach out to us. You all have my email, and we're happy to help. You will get a copy of the deck, and we will provide the recording for the Q&A directly to you. Thank you so much. Erin, do you have anything to add?
No, I just saw one last question that says, is there a page for the specific eligibility requirements? And if you go to ctpleave.org, we have a coverage and eligibility tab. Check that out. But thank you so much, and we're glad to spend some time with you and hope that this was helpful. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
And Federal FMLA, the best source of information is their website. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing.